The boots he left by the door. WWII 1945. The morning sun crept softly across the wooden floorboards of the old farmhouse, casting long golden rays that touched the edge of the doorway, where a pair of worn-out army boots had rested untouched for over a year. Eleanor stood silently in the kitchen, her hands cradling a chipped porcelain cup that had long gone cold. The boots, scuffed and muddied from some faraway battlefield, sat just as her son James had left them, laced loosely, tilted inward as if they too were waiting to rise and walk again. Every morning she opened the door a little wider than needed, just enough to glance at them, just enough to whisper a quiet hope into the wind that maybe, just maybe, this would be the day. A figure came walking down the dusty path. The letter had arrived in 1944, with its cruel formality and inked condolences, but Eleanor never let it reach her soul. It sat in a drawer beneath the family Bible, never spoken of, never accepted. To the world, James was gone, but to her, he was simply not home yet. And as the town forgot and the seasons turned, the boots remained a silent shrine to a promise made by a boy who once hugged his mother tightly on that very porch and whispered, "Don't worry, Mama, I'll be back before harvest." The fields behind the farmhouse had known the hands of generations, each season carving its memory into the soil. James had grown up there, chasing chickens barefoot, helping his father tie sacks of grain, and lying under the stars talking about places he'd never been. That final harvest before he left was the first he had done without complaint. He worked longer, smiled more, and on the last day, carved a small J+E into the oak tree behind the barn, just above the notch where Eleanor used to mark his height every year. "I'll bring you something from Europe," he said, tossing a wheat stalk between his teeth. "Maybe a medal, or a French cookbook if I survive the food." They had laughed then, both pretending that war was just a long detour, not a final goodbye. But the harvest came and went, and James did not. The radio reports grew darker, letters slowed, then stopped, and finally came the knock on the door that split Eleanor's world in two. She remembered staring past the man in uniform, her mind drifting to the boots he had cleaned so carefully before he left. He had told her to keep them by the door, so I don't track dirt through the house when I come back. She never moved them, not even once. They stayed right there, quietly guarding the doorway between hope and heartbreak. Winter came hard that year, the wind curling beneath the doors and howling through the shutters like a mother's unanswered cry. Eleanor began wrapping the boots in an old quilt, afraid the cold might somehow seep into the laces, as if James could still feel it wherever he was. Each night she lit the lamp by the window and placed it facing east, just like he had asked her to do in case I get back late. The neighbors pitied her, though they never said it aloud. They brought pies and kind smiles and tried not to glance at the boots. But what they didn't know, what only Eleanor knew, was that she had once received a letter, weeks after the Army's official notice. It was dated wrong, the handwriting shaky, but it was his. James had written about snow in Belgium, about missing the scent of bread in the oven, and how he'd give anything just to sit on the porch again and hear the wind through the wheat fields. He ended with, "Tell the boots I'll need them soon." That line broke her more than any condolence ever could. She read it every Sunday after church, holding it with hands that trembled more each week. She never showed it to anyone, not because she didn't believe it, because it was the only proof she had that someone out there still remembered the sound of home. It was nearly spring when he came, an unfamiliar figure walking up the dirt road, framed by the morning mist. Eleanor had been watering the lavender by the porch, the cold still clinging to her knuckles. She saw him from afar, a tall man limping slightly, dressed in civilian clothes but carrying the silence of a soldier. She didn't move at first, didn't speak. She had imagined this moment so many times that it felt like a dream, stitched from longing. When he reached the gate, he took off his cap and stood still. Not a word passed between them for a long while. Then he said softly, "Ma'am, I was with James. We were in the same unit." Her knees weakened. She steadied herself against the porch rail, her eyes fixed on him like they were searching for pieces of her. Sun in the stranger's face. "He saved my life," the man said, his voice cracking. "Told me to run. He didn't make it." He handed her a small folded cloth. Inside, it was a photograph, a rosary, and a broken watch with James's initials carved faintly on the back. Eleanor took it all wordlessly, tears spilling as if something inside her had been unpaused. The man looked down at the boots. He used to talk about them, he whispered. Said they'd be by the door when he got home. Eleanor nodded, clutching the cloth to her chest. They still are. Years passed. The world moved on. New roads were built. New families moved into the valley. And war stories faded into the yellowed pages of books and folded flags in glass cases. But at the edge of that quiet Kansas field, the old farmhouse stood still, its paint peeling, its porch creaking with time. Eleanor, now silver-haired and slow in step, remained. The boots never moved. She cleaned them gently every Sunday, tied the laces just as James had liked them, and whispered into the leather as if he could still hear her. The photograph the stranger brought stayed framed beside her bed, resting on a doily James had once stained with blackberry pie as a boy. She never remarried, never left. She didn't need to. Every corner of the house held echoes of her son, his laughter in the hallway, his muddy footprints ghosted across the kitchen tiles. On her final evening, the sun cast amber light across the fields, and the porch lamp flickered on just as it always had. Eleanor sat in her rocking chair, the letter and photo on her lap, and looked out across the path, where the horizon met the sky. You kept your promise, she whispered, eyes soft and full of peace. When the neighbors found her the next morning, she was still sitting there, a smile on her lips and the boots, polished and waiting right beside her. No dust, no decay, only memory, and love that never walked away. Subscribe for more good old days.